Roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Susan Manning?
Aye.
Maureen? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right. There are no public appearances today. May I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Hey, Lorraine, I had one question about WIAA.
You have to pull it. Yeah, you just pull it out of the.
Can I pull 6 and 7?
And then they go to discussion?
Yes.
Can I make a motion to pull 6 and 7 from the consent agenda?
Second.
Or you don't need a motion to do it, you just do it. So I move approval of the consent agenda as presented, items 1 through 5,
Second?
and 8, sorry.
Second?
Okay. Roll call vote. Or any further, well, sorry, roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Susan Manning?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it.
So my question for 6 and 7 with WIAA membership is, I just want to get a better understanding of WIAA because I have a lot of issues with WIAA. And one of them is I think they hold a lot of schools hostage to be a part of WIAA, follow their guidelines, follow their rules. And it seems to me that the real benefit of the WIAA is really just the tournaments, am I right? That's kind of like the thing that is always hanging over everything, is you can't be a part of the tournaments if you're not a part of WIAA. Is that correct?
That'd be
Am I
correct.
right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, they're not real. What are they providing for us as a district?
I think the other possible, I don't know this for certain, but I know the WIA approves conferences, so I don't know that if you were a complete independent, you could be part of a conference as well.
But if you were an independent, could you still participate in a WIAA tournament?
I'm pretty certain that would be no, that they would say no, you have to be a member school to participate.
So we're part of the Badger Conference, correct?
Yeah.
So if all the schools in the Badger Conference decided they didn't want to be a part of the WIAA and they wanted to have their own conference tournament, they could do that.
Yes. Yeah, if you were not part of the WIA.
There's no funding
There's
or
no
money we
rules
would be
at all.
losing or anything like that. We still pay for the refs. There's still student
Yeah.
athletes. We just would have to come up with our own bylaws as a conference, separate from WIAA.
I believe so, yeah.
Has anybody ever explored that?
I'm not aware of any schools that,
Okay, I was just
Very
curious.
independent, yeah.
I just think like, everybody constantly is always like just members of WIAA, and I don't think they question like, what benefits is
Yeah.
WIAA providing.
you pretty much
Us
have
as
to be if you want to
districts.
participate and play other schools. The only thing I can think of is back in the day when the private schools had their own organization before they merged with the WIA. That's got to be going on 20, 30 years after that.
As a
merger.
district, do we have any say in the governance of WIAA?
We do. So there is an elected board of control that is made up of school administrators throughout the state that are elected. So we have a vote in that as far as representation. And then also there are certain things that all members have a vote on as well. So that's how we're represented.
And when there are state tournaments, do the schools get any of the money that is collected for those state tournaments? Does it all go to WIAA?
The host school gets a partial reimbursement for being a host of an event, like at a regional sectional level.
Okay.
But otherwise, the proceeds go into the organization.
Okay. Those are my questions of it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd support the membership, but I also think maybe we need to start asking more questions about WIAA and like really taking a closer look at what they're doing and how much it's benefiting the student athletes. I'm hearing from coaches and student athletes that there's a lot of issues with the WIAA.
Elizabeth and then Susan.
I know nothing about the WIA, so like what are the concerns?
Well, I could say a big concern would be like schools and athletes that can participate in the tournaments, WIA regulations, how much do the schools have, like for instance, how much, if our school, like we have a student athlete, like let's say, that is suspended, how much of that is the school and how much of that is WIAA?
Yeah. They have certain rules in place as far as minimum requirements, but for the most part, things like that, there's controlled by the school district.
Okay, and then, the other thing is, I think they have certain requirements, like for, teams to participate in tournaments, right?
Yeah, I think, as far as team rules, every sport, they have their rules and regulations about how many contests, when you
Right.
can practice, all
Yeah.
those sorts of things. The other thing that comes to mind that's a pretty big issue is, for individual students, is eligibility.
Uh-huh.
They have, a lot of rules about transfers. If you, transfer at certain years, then you're not eligible to play at the varsity level for a year, that sort of thing. Those are, the ones that impact kids directly.
And they also have rules about, this is a big one,
Academics.
they also have rules about, like, student athletes participating in sports outside of school,
Yeah.
and when they can do that. And
Yeah.
now, with all the new things that are available to students, it can really limit students' participations, like over the summer, for instance, and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
so in fact, that's something that used to be in place, that really there was little to no contact that you could have outside of our coaches with our athletes outside of the season. They have changed that quite a bit over the last, probably 10, 15 years, where now in some sports, there's no limit. In others, there's a number of contact days that you can have, like throughout the summer. But you're right, there's a lot of rules, but it is an elected, meaning, there's representatives from school districts
Yeah.
that have to approve all those, but there's no doubt it's a bureaucracy.
Right, and I'm aware that, this is not something I'm saying we wouldn't be a member. I'm aware of the significant impact that would have on the student athletes at this time, but I also think as a district, we need to maybe be asking more questions about the WIAA, and other districts, I think, need to do the same. It's kind of, there's just seems like they run kind of amok with making determinations, even though we have somebody there. If they want to make a rule, they make a rule, and you're left like, okay, well, you can be part of the WIAA, or if you're not, like, good luck, even though if you disagree with it.
Well, and I think the academic eligibility is a little bit of a challenge too. Like, I'm not
It's
sure
a huge challenge.
why they're dictating that when we should be dictating that.
I think it's a huge challenge.
Now I'm really into WIA.
I personally don't think I'm sorry, just one more thing then I'll stop. I personally don't think students should be punished for participating in extracurricular activities because of grades and other things. I think extracurricular activities can help students come to school, be more involved in school, and be better students. But it's like we're taking away, something that they might enjoy and that is a healthy thing for them to do, because they're struggling in school and not looking at the real problem of why they're struggling. They're not struggling because they're in the sports. But it's always been a thing, like, I've grown up with, like, if you don't get grades, and even as a coach, you don't participate in the sport. And I've had students, this student really tries really hard, this is a good thing for their life, not a bad thing. And then they they can't be participating in sports, so they can't do the tournament, and then, things just go downhill from there. So, this is my 2 cents.
Susan Manning?
Well, I think these are really good questions, and I think they're very helpful for us as a board to hear the questions. Clearly, Dan saw this as we've agreed that contracts that we've already had previously that are non-controversial would be in the consent agenda. Your feeling seems to be that this contract in the group is controversial. It's not really scheduled for discussion.
I'm just raising
No,
questions.
I
No, but you
understand.
said, Susan, you said you were trying to say, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm really just raising some questions about the membership of being in the WIA because it's in the consent agenda, which I think is well within my rights as a board member to ask those questions, and that's all I'm doing. That's it, they're just questions.
I agree. And I think if, in fact, as a board, we don't have a good understanding of WIA and its membership, then that's something we need to spend time on. I don't know that, this is when you pick up the phone, call Dan and say, I think we gotta pull this because we gotta talk about it. That's what I do when I see a contract. I'm just looking at processes that we use, because
I'd
these are
rather,
the-
I'd rather
these-
quite honestly
just
do it in a public
finish
forum though, so
my
people can hear
sentence,
it.
please. And that is, I agree, this is a good discussion. I'm just thinking this may not, you know, we're not really scheduled for a full discussion on it, and I'd like us to have one. So I was gonna suggest to Dan that at some point, you bring our athletic director forward to talk to us about this. And I don't know where that leaves us in terms of approving or not approving the membership renewal.
Susan Fox?
Yeah, I'm not in disagreement without talking about it either, and it should be a separate meeting. I think tonight we probably need to approve it because that is the organization. It has been the governing organization for high school sports. I just looked this up since 1895. And as far as those grade eligibility, that's our policy too. And I would have to have, that's a whole different discussion, and I'm not in 100% agreement with you on that, so that would be another thing to discuss. The eligibility they talk about is more when you transfer, and part of that was to preclude students from moving to different schools to be on specific teams. I mean, it does go to a level playing field, so there is a role that it plays, I think. So I think it is worth a bigger discussion, but I think tonight, after this limited discussion, we probably need to go ahead and, we'll have to vote for it separately from the, did we vote on the consent agenda yet?
Mhm.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
So we have to vote on this one separately. But then you had a question about, on the other item too, Eric, what was that?
No, it was just that, it's just MG 21 and us.
Oh, okay,
both
because they're
WIA,
both,
yeah.
okay, got it.
And I said I would vote for it. I was clear I would
Right.
vote for it. I understand
Right.
the process.
Right.
If you don't mind,
That's fine.
I'll just read the one sentence from our policy so we're on the same page. This
Okay.
is on the consent agenda. It says, "A member of the board may request any item to be removed from the consent resolution and defer it for a specific action and more discussion."
Right,
So,
but
which
right, yeah.
I think is what's happening, right?
Well, so I think it is. So I think
It's exactly what's
yeah,
happening.
having another discussion would be great. So in the meantime, then I would move approval of items 6 and 7 on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Susan Manning?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Great. Next are recognitions.
Okay, even though we're into the summer, we do have a couple recognitions tonight as we wrapped up the school year. So, before the school year ended, students at Cottage Grove School learned about stormwater pollution and solutions to prevent pollution. They also teamed up with a local artist to paint a storm drain outside of the school, and the final product looks great. And there's a link again with some additional information. Upcoming high school senior Lena Greisch took on the responsibility of continuing the weekly pop-up food pantry at a local apartment complex. Her contributions to the pantry included taking it over from a past Madison East student, setting up the donations, and even setting up a drive for non-food items like toiletries and clothing. We're so happy to see an MG student doing good for the community. Again, link with some additional information. And our elementary school celebrated the last day of school with parades through the halls to say goodbye, spending time outside, and lots of farewell smiles. And again, there are a number of pictures for you for those last day moments.
All right, there are no correspondence and announcements. Next are administrative reports. Dan?
Yeah, just a short update on a couple items that are happening or did happen and are continuing to work on over the summer. So, summer curriculum work, that's something that had been put on pause or had to be adjusted during, due to the pandemic. And we're excited to have a full slate of curriculum work available for our teachers. They kicked it off already last week with ELA Standards Work Group. And it was nice to see teachers enthusiastically getting back involved with this important work over the summer. And so we'll certainly be glad to share out more, later on some of the work that's been that will have been completed. Dane County Equity Consortium, there was a board workshop last week in the middle of a weather situation. We had a little break where during the tornado warning that we had to seek shelter, but
In a girls' locker room.
yeah. But it was a great event, and we had 3 students to present, and as always, it's always great to hear their stories directly from their experiences, and so I just wanted to make note of that for the board members that weren't able to attend, that the consortium will continue. There'll be more opportunities in the future, and I think there's some information I can share out with you as well in the future that what we've been working on with our consortium members, throughout the year as well. And lastly, strategic planning update. So we did have our full admin team retreat last Thursday. That also included some teacher leaders that joined us to continue the work of moving forward with our first year objectives the terminology, action plans. We're actually determining some things called milestones that we're going to be working on this first year. So it was a great day. We actually used Granite Ridge School. The ELA workshop was here in this building, and so our staff really enjoyed, our team enjoyed spending the day out at Granite Ridge. And so that's really set us up well for the work. We will continue our past tradition of, in August, bringing our school leadership teams for a full day meeting as well. So we'll have some work that we can do in the interim throughout July. Then we'll share out our next draft of the work with the board here by the beginning of August, and then kind of a final draft of year 1 objectives here before the school year starts.
All right, next are board reports. Ad Hoc Sustainability Committee, Peter is not here, so we'll go to the Monona Grove Education Foundation. Susan Manning?
The Monona Grove Education Foundation met on June 14th, 2022, and I actually wrote out a report and included it in the board docs for anybody that would like to see that. Dan did just as he did now. I provided an update on end of the school year and ongoing work on the strategic plan. The kind of fun thing is I made sure, because they had it in their agenda, the list of the 2022 MGF scholarship recipients, and there were 15. And again, it's kind of fun to look at the names of the scholarships, because many of those people we know or knew, and then to see the students and the number of scholarships that were given out. In terms of their committee reports, Jane Beebe reported on the Grant and Awards Committee and had received 1 grant request for Pay It Forward funds, and they are continuing discussion with Krista, who submitted the request. No update on Communication Foundation Committee report. Again, the date for the golf ball drop at the Dream Park in Monona, Wisconsin is going to be Saturday, October 8th, 2022. And they've already received 1 sponsorship from Boardman and Clark, which is really nice. And then Jason did a little update on the scholarship, and again, you can see the list of the awards that were given in my report. There was a lengthy discussion about, I'm sorry, there's a misspelling in the Optimus Snack Pack Committee. The Cottage Grove Optimist Group actually does a snack pack program that is wonderful for our students, and they're talking about how to be able to bring that program under the Education Foundation funding. So there was quite a bit of discussion on that, and who would be, how that would work as a committee, and what they would do about board membership. And then they did discuss bylaws, size of the board, status of board members, and that kind of thing for a while. And their next meeting is July, but there's no action taken on that issue. The next meeting is July 12th, 2022.
Okay, thank you, Susan. All right, next are possible action items versus employee health care benefits.
Okay, last meeting, you might recall, we had Alan Yeager join us from USI to give a presentation on the status of our health insurance plan. And so for tonight, we synthesized that down just to about 1.5 pages of really the timeline about the process that got us to this point, And then the actual recommendation of change that would take effect on January 1st, 2023, of increasing the deductible for 100 single, 200 family to 200, 400, and then an increase in the copay for the emergency room from 100 to 150. In there also is background information about where we received feedback from the insurance committee. And the biggest thing, just as to point out, is that they understood that if we do need to make some changes to keep costs down, it was a strong recommendation to stay away from the co-pays for office visits, that the deductible change seemed to be much more fair and manageable for our employees, which we're in agreement with. So we're really glad. You'll see the original rates that we had, the amount that Al and his team were able to negotiate down to a much more manageable, just over 2% increase. So, so with that, we are asking for approval for these plan changes to take effect January 1st.
Can I have a motion, please? Susan Fox.
I move approval of the adjusted employee health insurance plan design effective January 1st, 2023 as presented.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
I just have a quick question.
I think Susan may.
Oh, I'm sorry, Susan, you go.
Okay. One of the things was, I'm actually the board representative on that healthcare committee, and I sent a note to Dan, and I thought he responded well, and you kind of alluded to my answer, the answer that you gave me at that time, but the committee had basically talked about some major issues. And how, I mean, you guys all know that health insurance is just continuing to go up and it's very expensive. So they're trying to figure out how to balance that off. And this committee really works hard to do this for the staff. And they're good leaders, and it's just a very difficult situation. And Al came back and presented to us as a board the things he'd been able to resolve. And so I specifically asked Dan, we haven't met as a committee, what's your thought about how the committee would you just give your answer?
Sure.
Because I think it's very helpful to hear this piece.
Yeah, so the one thing, that we really wanted to get consensus on were, okay, what, if we do have to make plan design changes, should they be? And that was something that I think we had clear consensus, again, about, to look at the deductible, emergency room copay, but stay away from the office visit copay. And we had a lot of conversation about why that's important and how that adversely affects some of our families with high, medical needs. And so, so with that, the last meeting that we had, it was, okay, that's the things we want to look at. And then, can we even, on the table at that point, we were looking at a deductible increase to a 300, 600. I was like, can we get that down lower? And so Al was able to get it down to 200, 400, that kind of met our budgetary requirements. And so we did email that back out to the staff, the committee. We didn't actually meet again, and I did have a couple committee members, contact me with some clarifying questions. And so it really is, as Susan mentioned, a really good committee that they understand the issues, and also understand that this is a big cost, and we can't just stay status quo, but to help direct us in the direction that we need to go. If we are just looking ahead a little bit, if we are going to look at some major design changes like high deductibles or even perhaps different carriers, that's a very different process, and that's where then the committee will help drive that, and we'll get staff input, surveys, that kind of thing. But for these minor tweaks, so to speak, I say minor, I mean, it's never minor, it's dollars out of people's pockets, right? But this is the group that really, I think, provides good feedback for us, so. So no plans.
And again, staying in similar district support for that as a benefit, that is a staff benefit, and following through with that. Again, I appreciate you, because that, I think, clarifies why it moved to the board rather than going back to the committee. And I wanted to make sure that the committee members also knew we recognized those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Well, you partially answered the question I was going to ask Dan, and that's when Al was here, he talked about the long-range planning components. I'm just kind of curious, what, if any, next steps there are in that.
Yeah, so this will give us another year then, basically the plan year 2023. Our thought is to reconvene right away this fall, or for sure by winter, a full year in advance of the next renewal.
All right, because we're on
And-
the calendar year, right?
Yeah, we go with calendar year renewal. And you know, we'll see. I mean, I guess it's possible we get lucky and we could stay status quo, but we're certainly not counting on that. We're planning as though we're going to have to look at doing something.
Okay.
And so we'll start that process early.
Thanks.
All right, do a roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Susan Manning?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. Next is the 2022-2023 non-represented support staff compensation plan.
Okay, so this plan, there was a review by the Personnel Committee, and at that time, we didn't have the final numbers, so we're still doing some costing. The goal was to increase our schedules for our non-rep staff, but still stay within the overall increase of 4.7%. And so Jared, in working through the costing, it actually came out really well, that basically we're able to, on up the schedule, increase the schedule by 3%. And which means people that are getting their step increases, they'll get that plus the 3% increase. And then other people that are off schedule, you know, a minimum of 3. So that costs out pretty close to the 4.7. So you have in there the actual document, the plan, the schedule that we're asking for approval of, and then you'll see a list of all the staff members and how that would impact them. So basically, it means every non-rep staff, depending on whether they have a step increase or not, a minimum of 3%, could be as high as 6% if they also get a step.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
I move approval of the 2022-2023 non-represented support staff compensation plan as presented.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just a quick question, Dan. So with the certified staff plans, we usually get comparables. Is there any way to get comparables for support staff?
Yes. Do I have up-to-date right now to share? No.
Yeah, that's all
kind of
right.
a work, but it is something that, you know, depending on the group, it's some are easier to get than others.
Yeah.
You know, as you know, some of these positions don't, every school district has a little bit different, you know, set up the way they tier those.
Yeah.
But that is something that, you know, particularly Jared and Nicole, you know, look at quite a bit. So I'll be honest, part of our conversation in having competitive wages is not so much even other school districts, but most of the time we're competing against the private sector
Yeah,
for
exactly.
these positions.
Right, yeah, the comparables I would imagine would be different because you're looking at industry.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of it is just kind of that anecdotal, you know, internal knowledge about the turnover, and when we're hiring people, are we able to, you know, hire the people that we want based on what we're offering for, you know, compensation. I think what we've learned is we've had to increase, you know,
Yeah.
pretty substantially. It's getting harder and harder, you know, to hire these support staff positions. It used to be that our strong benefits were enough to, you know, really attract a strong applicant pool. That still is an important part, but not as much as it was.
Yeah, as the wage. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Hi.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Susan Manning?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. Next is the 2022-2023 preliminary budget.
So yes, so
I know, I feel like she'd be playing End of the Road by Boys to Men. Review and also our budget.
no, it's just a new beginning. So Mark is here, and he'll be able to take it from here, and you guys will fly. So at the last board meeting, we had talked about very high-level preliminary budget, some of the assumptions that we're going into building this preliminary budgets for the 22-23 school year. So pretty much everything I talked about at last board meeting has been incorporated in and obviously spread out between the different funds. Part of the reason that the board needs to approve a preliminary budget at this board meeting is that July 1st is our beginning of our fiscal year. and there are expenditures that we have to start purchasing even though we don't have a final budget. School starts in September, the supply chain is continuing to get longer and longer and longer, so we're trying to get POs out as soon as possible for some of those supplies that definitely need to be here before school starts, especially surrounding like the IT, which is the next item on the board agenda for the leasing program for a number of our computers or our Chromebooks. So tonight you're only going to really be approving the funds that we actually will be tapping into until the board has the budget hearing, which is in September, and then the board approves the final budget at the end of October. Obviously, there's lots of moving parts that are going to happen from tonight's moving all the way through the end of October. Specifically, our third Friday enrollment will be a big indicator of what that looks like. We're in the middle of open enrollment. All the offers have went out. We're getting our acceptance letters back. That doesn't mean that even if they accept, doesn't mean they're going to show up on the first day of school. They actually have to be here on the third Friday as well. We have some housing developments that are happening in Cottage Grove, and we have some moving around in Monona. When you talk to individuals that are actually enrolling students, they talk about how we have a lot of kids coming. But then at the same time, in August is when we get a lot of the kids that are moving out, because then the other schools start sending their records. So it's looking very positive right now. I talked to Katie O'Shea, who is our student registrar, and she believes that she's registered close to about 200 kids. Now that includes open enrollment. If you recall, we did have I don't want to say a large number of open enrollment, but we did have a significant number of open enrollment. So the document that I did attach just gives you an overview on page 1 of the different funds that will be coming forward. We don't need to talk. I've talked through that with you guys a number of times. So let's just get to the heart of Fund 10, and we'll start out with the revenue side of things. So as we talked about at the last board meeting as well, is that unfortunately we're not getting any additional funding from the states. So the district will be using a majority of new revenue coming through ESSER 3, which is the third round of the ESSER funding, and $1.3 million is what's being funded into this, which is going to show up under the federal revenue. So we're anticipating about $2 million being utilized. Now that's not all ESSER. 1.3 of that is ESSER 3 funds. Otherwise we get Title I, Title II, and 3 and 4. So right now I'm continuing to use the state aid amount as what we have currently. That first estimate will come out on July 1, so next Friday. And then we can update the board, and based on where our enrollment looks like, and as I talked about before, we actually need 28 new residents before we even see any new revenue on the revenue limit. So I'm using the same tax levy for the purposes of building this initial preliminary budget. I do anticipate seeing the overall open enrollment revenue coming into the district increase about by $550,000. Currently we're at about 3.8 million. And we should see about $4.4 million with open enrollments. So going into the initial preliminary budget, we're looking at just shy of $49 million in revenue for Fund 10. If you go to the next page, we'll move into the expenditure side of things. Obviously, the majority of our budget is made up of salary and benefits, and that's about just shy of 80%. So we're looking at about just shy of $34 million. And that incorporates all the staff increases and staffing plans that the board has approved thus far. The good news is all staff groups except for one have been settled, and so you really left with just one employee group, which is the educational assistants that will need to be the compensation finalized. And I believe that will happen probably in early fall. And then this also incorporates the health insurance changes that you guys just approved at that 2.19% average. Obviously, whenever we hire new staff, it's always, are they taking the family plan, are they taking the single plan, or maybe they won't take any plan. Or people get married over the summer. So really, we embed into some increases in health insurance more than maybe that will really happen, just trying to anticipate that. When we look at the purchase services, the 300s, that is increasing close to about 5%. Purchase services where you'll see your utility costs and our transportation costs, which is the fuel. Those are the big areas that, as I talked about at last board meeting, is really going to see that significant increase. Then as we walk through, everything will stay pretty much the same. On the Object 800 transfer, that's 127, that is seeing a small increase of about 200,000, because obviously when we talk about doing increases to staffing, both compensation and benefits, we have special ed staff that also get that. And those are all accounted for in Fund 27. And then we also, when I get to Fund 27, we are anticipating an additional $200,000 in state aid based off of our expenditures that we use this year and the second year of the biennium budget. So we are looking at an estimated expenditure total of just shy of $50 million at $49,600,000, which means that our revenues are lower than our expenditures, which at last board meeting I had indicated that we would have to tap into our fund balance, and right now we're looking at about that $776,000. Obviously, like I said, a lot of moving parts. I will guarantee you that when Mark comes back, these will not be the exact same numbers that you see. And there's, obviously we're going through the hiring process. We have staff that are retiring, so there might be some savings there. Depending on who we hire, there might not be savings because the job market right now is very, very tough. And in addition to that, there are individuals that have chosen to leave the district, and depending on what those candidate pools look like, we might see a higher expenditure in that category as well. And then we are hiring an additional some new staff members, especially around the social emotional, the mental health areas like the guidance counselors, school psychs, social workers, part of that new staffing plan. So right now with Fund 10, we are looking at jumping into our fund balance of about $776,000. So then if we go to the next page, page 4, which moves us on to Fund 27, which is our special education funds. So what we account for in here is anybody that would be classified working with students with IEPs. Pretty much Krista, the Director of Student Services, oversees pretty much the entire Fund 27 budget. And what we're seeing there cannot be any type of fund balance, which means that whatever we don't collect in revenue and we spend in expenditures, the general fund needs to supplement that. And that's what I had talked about with the transfer side. And right now with the biennium budget, it's estimated at a 30% reimbursement rates, which is for every dollar that we spend on aidable things, which is pretty much staffing, we get 30 cents back from the states. When I say an estimated 30%, it's because it's just the allocation in the budget for a total dollar amount. And then based on what schools reports at the end of this fiscal year, we'll determine what that real reimbursement rate is. That number has stayed consistently low. I would say this last biennium budget is where we've seen more of an increase coming with special education, but we're far from that 50 to 55% where it used to be at. So when we talk about that additional $200,000 coming in state aid, we're looking at about $2 million in state reimbursements. And then on the federal sources, we do receive 2 federal grants, flow through and preschool flow through. We're anticipating a little bit of carryover from this year, so we probably will be using about $1 million to help supplement some of those new positions that we have hired through the staffing plan, and that would be taken out of a federal flow-through grants. So we're looking at a revenue projections of $7.4 million. And then that corresponds down with the expenditures, which will also equal that $7.4 million. And once again, majority of our expenditures are in that staffing, the salary and benefit side. So we're looking at just a little over overall 5% increase in salary and benefits, because we have a 4.7% with CPI and 2.19% with health insurance, and then some new staffing coming in. When we talk about purchase services, the majority of our purchase services are in contracts with other schools to provide services that we can't provide, such as alternative placements, OT/PT services. And then really when you look at overall the entire budget being $7.4 million, the supply budget is really, really small in special education. Right now we're looking at about $30,000, and most of that is coming from the side of flow-through funding nets, because supplies and equipment are not aidable, so we do have to take that through the grants. So that is a balanced budget there, and obviously just like Fund 10, there will be changes that will come along with that. Moving on to Fund 50, Fund 38, Fund 39, which are our 2 debt service. The first debt payments happen in November, so that will be after your official approval of the budget. So that's why that's not in here. However, Fund 50, school nutrition, we are moving back into the paid status concepts, which is crazy.
So frustrating.
So what we're seeing here is when you see the budget reports from DPI, they do give you like the 2 historical years plus what we're projecting. You'll see that there was hardly any food sales because since the district was reimbursed 100% from the federal government, more of that was coming from the federal sources. So we had to back down the federal sources from about 1.6 million down to about 600,000, which is similar to what it was before. And then food sales went up to that 850, which is very close to where we're at. Now that is going to be the juggling act that we have because we have high participation right now due to a couple of reasons. Obviously, everybody gets a free meal, and obviously there's a lot of financial insecurity, food insecurity that's happening, which will continue. So we're projecting what our participation rates are going to be. We know for sure it's not going to be the same that it is right now. We would love it to be the same that it is. However, we know that's not a realistic thing. In addition to that, on the expenditure side, we're seeing some really, really large increases in food cost. We're also concerned about what does that food supply chain look like. I don't know if you've heard in the news, but it's been a couple of years now, but Dean Food is going out of the milk business. And so now it is truly, like, I think their last production has happened in the last couple of weeks. So like school districts won't be able to purchase cartons of milk from Dean. So when you take those big, large suppliers out of the market, it pushes it to others which might not be able to necessarily meet the demand that's coming. Which then when we know how the supply and demand chart works, so when there's more demand, those prices go up. So we do anticipate seeing a much higher cost in food. In addition to that, obviously what we talked about with our new school nutrition director wanting to introduce some new vegetables, that's going to bring some additional cost as well. So right now we are anticipating having a balanced budget. Where we're tracking right now is that we will be able to put some money from this year into fund balance, which will help supplement this next couple of years. But I think the biggest thing to remember is that we are moving off of the free for everybody to back to paid status. So we will want to make sure that our families are aware that there's still the free and reduced application process, but that also has a very low thresholds, or I should say high threshold, because the annual amount for like a family of 4 is really below even the minimum wage side of things. So it makes it really hard for families to qualify. So we do encourage families to do that, but I will say that the district will continue to do what we've always done. If a family does not have money in their account, they still will get the same meal that every other student has. And if that means that we need to partner closer with our foundation, the Optimist Club, our community, to be able to supplement that through donations, the district will definitely do that. Moving on to Fund 80. Fund 80 is our community service funds. You will see there, right now, we typically have about a $650,000 tax levy that comes to support our community levy. Our community service fund, I am proposing a small increase up to $725,000. Part of that is that we are rolling out a new program, the wraparound program, which is going to start at Taylor Prairie, and I think the goal would obviously be able to spread that throughout the district. So there are going to be some additional costs that will come along with that. In addition, there's been some increases in obviously compensation. When we look at all of our groups, some people are paid on the Fund 80 side of things. We still have our 2 SRO officers that are being funded through that. And majority of the funding actually is going to support our auditorium, our summer camps, and our aquatic center. And with the aquatic center specifically, just like with every other group of trying to hire our aquatics, trying to hire lifeguards, like if you've seen in the news, there are at the UW pool, they're closing down early because they can't hire lifeguards. A lot of the community pools are reducing hours, and so we've had to invest a significant amount to increase our wages to be able to keep our community pool open to our community as well. So actually, we're looking at an approximate budget of about $975,000 for the community funds. And obviously, we provide those swim lessons so we could see some more revenue. The wraparound care is a program that obviously will also give us some additional revenue, but we don't know what that looks like right now. We obviously know the number of people that are planning on attending, but as we work through that process, those revenues will probably get fleshed out a little closer as well. So that's where we're at with our overall initial preliminary budget for 22-23. Any questions?
Elizabeth?
I have a question, Jared. Thanks for this. I don't have actually a question about your budget projections. I'm wondering about, I've been following the gun safety legislation that just passed through the Senate, and there's some discussion in there around additional funding to schools, specifically in the area of sort of school safety, some mental health services, some prevention services. I know it's obviously too early to know exactly what that is, but I'm just kind of curious, in your circles, has there been any discussions around kind of like what the potential allocation there could be, or what the mechanism by which the allocation would happen in the event that it passed?